Hello, everyone. Today we're covering who I believe to be the most controversial president in the history of the US. We're covering the presidency of Andrew Jackson. And, it is always very interesting to talk about Andrew Jackson because you can see him as, the champion of democracy, the man who reinvented the presidency, this enormous legacy, this very long lasting legacy uh, in American politics, but you could also see him as authoritarian, overstepping his figure. He's controversial. He's become controversial in the past year. So it is always very interesting to talk about Andrew Jackson. All right, so let's get started. So as I've discussed in other video, Andrew Jackson is the first populist president. He is the first president who's really self-made, who's the first president who believes himself to be the sole and only representative of the entire nation. But this is not what makes Andrew Jackson, controversial, right? Right? What makes Andrew Jackson controversial is that there's a lot of positives and there's a lot of negatives within his legacy. All right. So to me, one of the most significant positives that impact his legacy is the idea of reinventing the presidency, right? What does it mean to be president, right? So we need to go back to the early days when the Constitution was written to understand that the founding fathers didn't believe that we should have a very strong president. Remember that very early on, I guess you could describe the founding fathers as very paranoid, right? They were very afraid of a powerful president, right? It is understandable because we had just left the monarchy. So people were very afraid of a king or an authoritarian figure, right? So the vision they had for the president was just as a figurehead, and they intended Congress to be the body of law that made all the decisions on behalf of the people. But the president was just supposed to enforce whatever Congress told them to do. And you can see a lot of this in the conversation between Jefferson and Madison, right? In which they discuss that if you really want to do change, you need to convince Congress. You need to have, Congress in your power to be able to do change because the president is just going to do whatever Congress tells him to do, right? So in the early days, this is the way we understood presidents to be, right? But Andrew Jackson comes to change this, right? Andrew Jackson comes to understand that, presidents are the only person in the government that is the sole representative of the entire nation, right? He basically thought of it as, all these positions of power that you have, none of them represent the entire nation. The president is the only one that is the true representative of the people. And so Andrew Jackson comes to challenge all these ideas that were thought of as being old, right? Because you also need to understand that when Jackson became president, the voting requirement changed, right? Voting wasn't just for the rich property owners anymore. It was for everyone. It was for the common man. And Andrew Jackson believed himself to be the champion of the common man. And therefore, everyone voted for him, so he should have the power to make decisions on their behalf, right? So he comes to redefine this idea of what does it mean to be president, and also take into consideration something that we don't think about a lot is that the first presidents very rarely campaigned to be president because everyone wanted to be like Washington, right? So you could argue the first six presidents shaped themselves to be like the first, right? Like Washington, right? Washington didn't want to be president. So he didn't campaign. He never said out loud that he wanted to be president because he really didn't want to be president. So Adams, Jefferson, Madison, Monroe, Quincy Adams, they hardly campaigned, at least not in the way that we understand today. They always did this song and dance about I don't want to be president, I don't want to be president, but if the people want me to be president, then I'll be president. I'll accept the nomination. So they couldn't just come out there and be like, I want to be the president because I want to have change, right? What they did was this very like paying some newspapers to float their names to see what the people thought. And, based on that, if the people asked them to be president, then they would turn it down one or two times just to show that you really want it. But then you were like, yeah, well, if the people want me to be president, then I'll be president, right? And Andrew Jackson also comes to change that, all right? Andrew Jackson, very similar to what we see today with Donald Trump in the huge rallies, is the same thing that Andrew Jackson would do when he campaigned, right? These huge rallies of the people, right? Just he just wanted to show that he's a man of the people, that this is their presidency just as much as is his presidency, right? And so judging the legacy of Jackson, there's a couple of things that you need to take into consideration. In this reinventing the presidency, Jackson is going to become extremely authoritarian. I believe he could be, the most authoritarian president that we ever had, right? He earned the nickname King Andrew, right? Uh, and this isn't a thing of like he just does whatever he wants to do, right? It's a thing of he's ignoring the Supreme Court decision. So the Supreme Court is specifically telling Andrew Jackson that he cannot remove the tribes from Georgia, right? But he's gonna basically say that he doesn't care, right? That this is for the benefit of the common man, and he's going to do it anyways, right? He's going to remove the Indians, right? So he passes this legislation, when the Supreme Court specifically is telling them that he's not allowed to. And, his answer is, John Marshall made his decision. Let let me see him enforce it. Right. So he's basically saying, cool, you don't want me to do that, but I'm gonna do it anyways. Right. So, these are things that are, even for the standard of the time, even for today, that would be considered crazy, right? This is something that, you know, I would hate today, right? I would hate the idea of a president who thinks he can do too much, a president who thinks he has too much power, all right? I'm a fan of the Constitution, and I'm a fan of the guardrails of the Constitution. And, Jackson basically says that that doesn't matter. What really matters is that you need to do what's best for the people, right? And that's basically his angle, right? I'm going to ignore the Supreme Court decision because this is what's best for the common man. I'm going to go against the decisions of Congress because this is what I believe to be the best for the common man. He gages war against the bank because he believes they're corrupt. He believes that they're only benefiting themselves at the expense of the people. And, he's going to do everything in his power, to dismantle the national bank. And, he's going against the decisions of Congress. Okay, so I think this is a very interesting case, right? Because most people criticize Andrew Jackson today and they want to remove him from the $20 bill, not because of what I mentioned, that he's an extreme authoritarian, but mostly because of his relationship with the Indians, right? That's what makes him very controversial today. The idea that he claims to be a representative of the people, or a representative of the common man, but he wasn't representative of, for example, Indians, right? Who he just doesn't see as, common man, who he removed from Georgia because they find gold, and he wants Americans, the common man, to be there and, mine that gold. And he's just willing to, he doesn't care about the Indians, right? So that's what makes him very controversial today. Uh, I believe this is probably the biggest stain in Andrew Jackson's legacy. Notice I'm not putting that trail of tears on him. The trail of tears happens under Van Buren. uh, Van Buren could have handled this differently. However, Van Buren is a Jacksonian, and he shares the vision of Andrew Jackson, and he didn't have to do this military actionable force against the Indians to enforce the Indian Removal Act, causing the Trail of Tears. But that's the way he did it, right? I would say the Trail of Tears is indirectly responsibility of Jackson, but not directly. But this is definitely the reason why he's the most controversial today. Although, in my opinion, what makes him the most controversial is the fact that, he's the most authoritarian president. However, he's doing it for the benefit of the common man, right? In his vision, ignoring Supreme Court decisions, going against the decisions of Congress. Nothing mattered. What really mattered was making the best for the common man, right? So for those same reasons, people also love them, and that's the reason why he's such a controversial president, right? Because you know he truly is a, representative of the people, right? And if that means going against the Supreme Court, if that means going against Congress, then so be it. All right. And at the same time, the way we understand democracy today, you know, comes from the idea of Andrew Jackson, right? And what I mean by democracy is the idea that we all vote, right? That everyone is supposed to be part of the country, right? Andrew Jackson truly represents that anyone can be president, right? And that, he represents everyone, right? This idea that we have of democracy today, that we all go and vote, we all go make decisions, we all participate in the sense that I can be a congressperson, I can be a mayor, I can be president, anyone can be it. It's a Jacksonian vision of America, right? It's a Jacksonian idea of the country's for everyone, not just for the elites, right? So he challenges these notions in a way that people don't get today, that they're Jacksonian. And the reason I say that people don't get it today is because most people hate Jackson because of, the actions against the Indians. At the same time, they don't understand that this idea, this country that we understand today, is the country that it's a very Jacksonian vision. Today, I like Andrew Jackson. I believe he's a very influential president. I think, the America we know today wouldn't be here without this Jacksonian vision. And not just that, but also reinventing the presidency, right? And again, this could be for good or for bad, but the way we understand presidents today are the very Jacksonian visions, right? The Jacksonian vision of I'm going to do whatever I think is going to be best. And if people don't like it, they can vote me out, right? But I'm not gonna sit around and wait for Congress to tell me to do things, right? I will do whatever I think is best, right? So this idea of active presidents enforcing visions, shaping policy, it's a Jacksonian vision also, right? Future presidents are more within the Constitution. They're not so, overreaching of their powers like Jackson is. But that vision, that future presidents act more in a very Jacksonian way, right? And so I always find very interesting to judge the legacy of Andrew Jackson, right? Because Andrew Jackson is one of those presidents that if he were to be president today, I believe that I would hate him, right? And not the idea of the champion of the common man, the idea of, this ultra authoritarian overstepping of his duties, right? Uh, these are things that, you know, I find it very difficult to justify, right? At least the way I understand it, right? The guardrails of the Constitution are there for a reason, right? So Andrew Jackson presents this interesting paradox of like what's more important, right? The Constitution or what he thinks is best for the people, right? My opinion is that the Constitution is there for a reason, and he shouldn't be overstepping his powers. But anyways, I don't want to take too much of your time. Let me know what you think. Do you support this new idea that they want to remove Andrew Jackson from the $20 bill and replace him with Harriet Tubman? Let me know what you think. I'll be around and be safe. Okay, see y'all.